Good morning. How's everyone going? I think we're live now. All right, I think we are. Live. Okay. Let me know, guys, if you can see the screen and everything is working well. I know that I think there was some problems last week with the Facebook streaming or the Facebook chat, something like that. So just wanna make sure that it's all right. Hey, Compressor. Hey, Winston, Eken, how you guys going? Hey, Neil, Neil W3D. Good to have you guys here. All right, I'm just finishing up a quick setup here on my other screen with all the OBS and the chat, so I can see what you guys are writing. Sound is fine. Good to hear. Great. So sound is fine. Not gonna touch that. Video is fine. All right. Good to go. Cool. So here is what we did. What we've been working on for the past 4 streams. Yeah, 4 streams. So in 4 weeks to do this character. I went ahead and I did a bit of an extra pass on this guy. I'll show you what I did, because it's nothing like super out of the ordinary. You could just, I don't think I need to show you the process. Is pretty straightforward. So what did I do? Hang on. Oh yeah. So these little things that are just hanging out from this side, and it just goes all around. They're just like planes that I sculpted a little bit, and that's it. nothing too drastic. Just trying to remember what else did I do. So I'll show you in a second. But all these little stitches, I just made an insert mesh and turned it into a curve insert brush, and I just created that pattern around the seams, and I also added a little bit of thickness to the cloth, and that's it. I think. Yeah, I think that's all I did. I mean, the color and the current render, that's just a quick filter that I put together because I thought it was gonna be cool. But other than that, it's just different gray values, nothing more. Hey, you got me into the 3D world. Oh, that's really good to hear. Mad Game Show. Did your ZBrush course on Udemy 1 year ago? Maybe not. I don't have a course in Udemy. Or maybe I do. I don't know if there's a course in there, not mine, or not that I'm aware of. I have a couple in lynda.com, or what is now LinkedIn Learning, but not Udemy. I wonder which one you're referring to, Mad Game Show. But anyway, good to have you here. So yeah, so that's what I did, and that's what I'm not gonna show you this unless you want me to. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward process. Instead, what I have for you today is a couple of extra techniques that are pretty cool. Just to finish up this guy, because last stream I said that was it, like we should just start with something else. But then I realized that there are a couple of things that I could show you, or a couple of things that we didn't touch on the previous streams, and they're pretty cool. And it's kind of like a variant to the FiberMesh. So it's just combining Nanomesh and FiberMesh in a way that you can maintain. Let's say if you have like something like this, like a little, curly hair, like in this case. If you use FiberMesh, you can create that from the settings, but then when you start grooming it, you're gonna lose it. You're gonna, straighten it up or flatten it or whatever. Whereas if we use a combination of Nanomesh and FiberMesh, we can maintain this shape without altering it at all, while we can also groom it. So it's a pretty cool technique. I'll show you that in a second. And the other thing I wanted to show you is, I don't know if I'm gonna add it to this guy, but the original concept or the idea had like these little, geometric little shapes around like a collar, like not a collar, a necklace. So I'm going to show you another way that you can create this. This is pretty straightforward as well, and you've probably seen it already, but I'm going to show you a way that you can randomize the placement of different elements in a curve or in a insert curve, and that's pretty cool. And I'll use something like that to just add the rest of the details of this guy and just call it a day and finish it. Other than that, that's the same. I mean, this technique that I'm going to show you with the necklace is the same that I use for creating a more random pattern here for the stitches. Matthew game. Linda. Oh, cool. Yeah. So that's the. Not sure which one you're referring to. Maybe the ZBrush core is the one that is in there. Hey, Khalil. Good to have you here. How you guys going? Cool. Alright, so let's get started with this. Like I said, this is just a BPR render with a couple of filters. I have 4 filters enabled. So this is how the character looks without the filters. And because I have poly paint in some areas and in some other areas I don't. So if I select the red color, you'll see all the FiberMesh, the mask, and all that has a white poly paint applied to it, like a full white poly paint. So it doesn't change when I move the colors. So if I just select like a gray color, it just changes the values on all these. So just if you were curious about why this one has like different values. So this one, like the horns, these bits here, the fingers or whatever this is, and the hooves, those have exactly this color that I'm selecting, this gray variant. The extra values, which are part of the cloth, those come from the noise maker. So I'm going to show you what I did there. So if I select, let's go ahead and just turn off a few stuff. Okay, and the beard as well. Maybe I should start naming stuff. Alright, so here's what I did. I just added a bunch of different patterns to the clothes to make it look like a little bit like leather. Very rough. I didn't spend time doing any custom alphas or anything. I just whatever I had in my resources, just put a tile alpha or a tile texture here to create this pattern. But because I don't have UVs or anything like that, if I rotate around, you'll see this has like all this stretching. So I really didn't spend too much time on doing that. I just did that literally after the stream, just drop it in there just to see how it was looking. But it's okay. I mean, if I'm gonna render from this angle and I'll just apply that, it should be okay. So yeah, what I did was here, if I select this one, and also you notice different from the previous stream, this is a separate piece. So I don't know if you remember, but I cut this entire shape. I cut it into pieces. So what I did was just I separated like mask, not mask, sorry, split by groups, and then I just added some thickness, and that's it. I just refined the sculpting, and that was it. Surface here. So here in the surface noise, if I go to edit, right, you can see this is the alpha that I applied to it. It's one of the alphas that I have in the clothes and drapery course, if you're interested. But it's nothing complicated. It's just stylable, and it just gives you this pattern. So yeah, all I did was just manipulate this, change the scale, the alpha, and all that. And because we don't have UVs, we cannot wrap it around the entire object properly, so it has to be from the view that you choose, which in this case is kind of like from this angle. So that's pretty much it. Alright, so let's go ahead and do the really cool technique with the FiberMesh and Nanomesh, because that's pretty exciting. So I'm going to use one of these meshes that I have here. Let's see. This one right here. So this is the one that we use as a base mesh to extract or to move the not to move, to create the FiberMesh, right? And that was all part of the previous stream. Probably. Cool. So yeah, so just to give you an idea of what the concept behind what I'm going to show you is, and you have an idea where I'm going with this, is I'm going to have two processes going. So I'm going to have a FiberMesh, right? And this is the one that allows me to create the, well, like fibers really, but I'm going to try to aim for a type of curly hair or something like that. So that's all done with FiberMesh. And then we're going to have Nanomesh. And Nanomesh is just going to be, we're just going to turn this piece of fiber that we create into a nanomesh, right? So when we have this mesh, like this, let's say that these are quads in the mesh, we will be able to take this fiber mesh and then just duplicate it or instance it along the different quads, right? So that's pretty cool, because the fibers are not going to be actual fibers, are going to be just a single nanomesh plane or a nanomesh fiber. So that's kind of like the idea. It might not make much sense right now, so I'll just explain it. Actually do it. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the basic. With the first step would be create the fiber, or create the object that you want to instance all around. So to do that, I'm going to create a new tool here. Probably a plane. It would be okay. I'm just going to turn it into a Polyimage 3D. And from this, I'm just going to create the fibers. So I'm just thinking that maybe I'll just rotate this around so that we don't have to deal with the gravity too much. So I'm just rotating that plane like so, and I'm going to turn on double so I can see it from both sides, just for the time being. Remember what I don't know if you remember from the last stream, I mentioned that with fibers it's good to have this off so that you don't create fibers in both sides of the normals of the polygons. Other than that, I reckon we just scale it down a bit. Let's go to fibers or FiberMesh, create some fibers, click preview, and you'll see, because I have double enabled, it's just creating this, creating the fibers both sides. So I'm going to turn this off, do another preview, and there you go. So now it's just from one side. Now the trick here would be to reduce this quite a bit. Actually, I'm going to see if I can load the preset that we had. That's not the one. I saved that preset. Yeah, here we go. So a couple of streams ago, this is the third stream. There we go. But obviously this is too much to create a nanomesh. So I'm going to try to reduce this. Okay, reduce this quite a bit. Maybe something like that is fine. I'm just thinking it should be less than this. So I'm going to mask an area, just an area here in the center of this square. And this is where the fibers are going to grow from. So I'm going to click preview again. Alright, so that's more what I was thinking. We can reduce the count even more. Alright, so something like that should be fine. And I'm going to reduce the gravity effect, so that it's just kind of like pointing towards the camera. So that's good. Maybe, no, I think that's good. What I'll do is I'm just going to increase the effect of the curliness, just for the sake of demonstration and showing you what I'm trying to show. So I'm going to go to the revolve rate and just increase that a tiny bit more. You see how it's just revolving over over itself. We can also tweak the twist a bit. But that's not, I mean, that's just twisting it over itself. So maybe not too much. And of 4, so it has 4 sides. It's kind of like a extruded cube, and it has 8 segments. So the segments are vertically, or like along the fiber. So we have like 8 sections here in each curve. kind of. So the the profile is how many of these sides, so there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, this is pretty basic, but you know what I mean. So segments are going to be these, how many of these are along the curve. So that's going to be quite a bit of polygons for the technique that I'm going to show you, or it might not. Maybe ZBrush can handle it. I haven't tried it honestly, but we can, just help out a little bit and reduce this. I reckon 6 is fine. In fact, we can just reduce this to 3, and we should get a pretty similar effect. And there's a couple of things that you can do. Like if you reduce this to, let's say 2, a profile of 2, it's going to be essentially a plane, right? But when you render it, if you go to the BPR settings, so within the FiberMesh you have PBR settings. By default, it should subdivide the each fiber. So let's just go ahead and render it. So it just subdivides this, and it just creates this very, very nice and smooth piece of fiber. And that's just from the render setting. So it's just a render effect. You can also, in theory, you could also change the sides. I think I just changed something, but you should be able to change the sides of these FiberMesh at render time. So I think I'm going to leave it at 2. It's not too bad actually. I'm going to turn off polyframe and do a quick render to see how this would look when rendered. I just add a different material. Alright, so it's not too bad. I think that will look quite interesting. So let's go ahead and accept that. And now this is just a piece of geometry, right? Or FiberMesh. So I'm going to turn off the plane, and we have our fibers. Cool. So what I want to do is just do a quick refinement of this. We can use any of the grooming brushes. So maybe Groom Hair Toss. Just want to make sure that there's no, maybe turn on double as well. Just want to make sure that there's no kind of like stranded polygons just somewhere weird. Try to maintain everything contained within this little area. And I think that's pretty much it, right? Another thing you can do is we can use deformers, and we can use also, like if I try to push this thing together, like the part at the bottom, kind of like the base of this polygon, right? So I would like to have more like a shape like this. So they all start from this angle and then just bulge out like this. So in order to do that, we can use a couple of things. We can try to do it with the brushes. However, if I try to do with the hair toss or the move brush or anything from this angle, I won't be able to do it because there is like a FiberMesh auto mask by default. So let's say if I take my move brush and I just try to move this, it's not gonna make much difference. It's not gonna make any effect, you'll see. But if I go to brush, I'm just gonna dog that to the right and go to modifiers, not modifiers. Where is it now? Auto masking, auto mask. Here we go. So in the auto mask, you have this auto mask FiberMesh. So if you just turn this off, right, you will be able to manipulate the base a lot more, right? And this FiberMesh auto mask, what it does is just mask the bases of the base of the FiberMesh, so that you don't destroy it when you're grooming it, right? And then that's the FiberMesh mesh mask curve is the one that determines how much masking you're applying from the root to the top, basically. So let's turn this off, and let's just move this thing a little bit. Remember that what I'm trying to create here is just it's just something that I'm gonna instance. So I'm gonna duplicate this and rotate it and just play with the variation in the Nanomesh. right? So we're just creating a nanomesh brush, really. That's all we're doing, but it's going to be a fiber. All right, so I'm going to turn this on back on again. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and create the nanomesh. And in order to do that, I'm going to rotate the camera, hold shift and snap that to the camera. Make sure perspective is off. So from the angle that we create the brush, that's how we're going to draw it later on. Let's go ahead and click on the brush thumbnail, and I'm going to click on insert mesh, create new. So now I can just click and drag, which ultimately that's something else that you can do. And this could be a good technique actually. Let me just show you what I would use this. Not this specific one, but oh, hang on. So let's say I want to create like some, if this was some kind of fabric, I can just go around all around the border and create like these tiny little pieces of like fluff or whatever it is. Right now there's quite a bit of a gap because we haven't tweaked this, but if I undo that, I can just take this and push it down a bit. You know, and I can do this type of thing. And you can have an insert mesh with multiple type of little fluffs and little pieces of geometry, and that's how you can create these type of details manually placing it. But that's not what I'm going to do. Just an extra thing that I thought you might find interesting and you could use. So where were we? Right, so we have the insert mesh. Let's go ahead and create that, turn that into a nano mesh so we can apply it to this mesh right here, which I'm actually going to go into solo mode, so it's faster. And I'm going to turn our current brush, our fluff, into create a nano mesh brush. Cool. So now this is a nano mesh brush, and the reason I know that is because we have the insert mesh that we created here, but the icon changes to this cube, which is kind of like a similar brush. So if I hover over any of these faces, right, and I click and drag, whoops, oh, you know what? Let me undo that. I think we had some nanomesh from the previous stream. So what I'll do is I'm just gonna duplicate that. All right, and go to Nanomesh so I don't delete what we did last stream. Turn Nanomesh on, and I'm gonna delete it. So I'm gonna go to Inventory and delete one. All right. So now we don't have any nanomesh, and we can do what I was trying to do. So hover over the face, click and drag, and we're essentially dragging that piece of geometry, which is just the fibers. Right. So that's great. That's the idea. However, I want to apply it to the entire set of faces, and I also want to tweak the placement. So right now it's too embedded. You'll see here it's too embedded into this mesh. But those are all things that we can do from the Nanomesh palette. All we need now is to have this piece and be able to apply it, and that's it. So I'm gonna right click on this face or press a spacebar, and I'm gonna make sure that the target is set to all polygons, or in this case you can also do polygroup all, since this is a single polygroup. But if you have like multiple polygroups, you can apply it to specific areas. That's the beauty of it. Right, so hopefully this is not gonna crash. I'm just gonna click and drag. Shouldn't. There we go. Alright, so let me undo that again. Here we go. Alright, so we have the fibers happening, which is pretty good. It looks too manufactured, like too, you can tell what the pattern is. So I want to randomize it, but before I do that, I want to go ahead and make sure that the root of the fibers are actually going through from almost the surface or the other piece. So like from this code or whatever that is. So that would be here. So all we have to do now is play around with this. No, hang on. I think I'm just showing you the. Well, let me just finish this one and then I'll show you the proper way. So let's go ahead and where are we? Height, offset in the z-axis might be the one. There we go. So just push that forward, right? And then if you wanna randomize things a little bit, then you can just play with the size, rotation in the z-axis as well, and then randomize that with variation, right? So it is very similar to for in terms of the Nanomesh. Right, so this is one way to go about it. Now, what I'm gonna do is combine both, right? Combine Nanomesh and FiberMesh with Nanomesh again. No, sorry, FiberMesh with Nanomesh and then with FiberMesh again. I'm gonna try to show you because it doesn't make sense right now, but it will in a second, I promise. So let me just delete that one. Right, that was just the kind of like the expected behavior of using FiberMesh or like any mesh really with Nanomesh. So the best way or the cool way of going about this is I'm gonna create a FiberMesh, right? So I'm gonna click preview, but this time I need to change all these settings back to the normal ones, or to something very simple. So instead of having fibers, what we're gonna create is a Nanomesh placement, or a way. We're gonna create fibers really that we can just groom, but those fibers are gonna be the placement of the Nanomesh of the other fibers. So let's just see if that makes any sense. So step one will be to create simple fibers as planes. So I'm gonna reduce the count quite a bit. I'm gonna reduce the profile to 2 and the segment to 1, and I'm gonna change the length, right? And I'm gonna increase the coverage. I'm gonna make sure that the scale root is 1 as well as the tip. So it's like the same at the top and at the root. What else? Let's just change twist to 0, revolve to 0, gravity, let's set it to 0. So I'm like super simplifying this. Let's go to the width profile, and I'm just gonna reset that. Just push this one up. So as you can see, these are basically just planes. That's all these things are. Can turn off. You won't be able to see it, but yeah. So let's go ahead and tweak the length a bit. I have double enable, so let's just do it again. There we go. All right. So those are just simple planes, and I think they're looking all right. We could, if we wanted to add a bit of gravity, and if we randomize the gravity or add some variation to the direction, it just creates this more like a random pattern. But I think I'm just gonna keep it simple and then just show you the technique manually, or what you can do manually. All right. So this is the first step. We are creating simple planes as a base, but they are FiberMesh. So we're creating like a Nanomesh placement, but they're FiberMesh. So this is step one, creating a very simple set of planes, and that's done within the FiberMesh settings, right? All right, so let's go ahead and click accept. Now what's cool about this is that these are just FiberMesh, so they will behave like any other FiberMesh, right? So we can take the, let's say, I don't know, the groom hair short, right? And these are just planes, but we can just groom them, right? We won't destroy them like we would if they were just normal planes. We can just groom these simple planes with the brushes, right? So this is great because again we have manual control of how to place or move these planes around. But what's even better is that we can turn each one of these planes into its own Nanomesh, or just instance a Nanomesh brush. So that's what I'm going to do. We can use the same brush that we created. I just want to tweak one thing, which is instead of creating a Nanomesh brush from this angle like I did before, I'm going to create it from maybe this angle. I think this angle would work. I don't know. You can change that from the Nanomesh settings. I'm just going to avoid or reduce one of the steps. So let's see if that works. I'm going to create a new brush. So create new insert mesh, new, right, and a new Nanomesh. All right, so this is just another brush, but in the same way that I created the previous one. All right. The FiberMesh base are simple planes, but keep clicking some. Shouldn't be. It might be my tablet again, just playing up. All right. So let's go ahead and go to the Nanomesh tab. So right now there's no Nanomesh, but if I turn on polyframe, right, all of these planes have the same polyframe. So I can just right click, make sure that the new brush that we created is set to all polygons or polygroup all, and hopefully this is not going to crash. I'm just going to click and drag, and there we go. So I'm going to rotate these fibers. I think I just did it in the inverted way. Yeah, not a big deal. So let me just get closer here. And I think it's working. I just need to rotate it around. So let's rotate it in the y-axis. Nope. In the x-axis. All right. So I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees here. So now we have the tip of these fibers, or these nanomesh, pointing upwards. So that's great. I think I'm just going to find a better place, a better way to do this. I think it's fine. I'm just going to use the offset in the z-axis just to push this. No, hang on. Y-axis. I just need to figure out the direction. Yeah. So the y-axis, I'm going to offset this a little bit, like so. So that's looking good. And then we can play with the variation in the scale and the size and things like that. So I can take the height, for example, and just do a little bit more. Nope, not the height. That's not the one I'm looking for. I think length is the one. There we go. So I'm just going to push the length a little bit and then add variations to it so that it randomizes it a bit more. We can just reduce the scale as well a tiny bit. That's cool. And then we can also variate the rotation in the z-axis. Yes? Nope. In the y-axis. Yeah, I think it's the y-axis. So in the y-axis, I'm going to rotate it a little bit and then use variations to rotate it. So it doesn't look as manufactured or as, as a single brush. So remember, this is just a single brush with a bunch of different fibers. Now, another cool thing about this is that we can go ahead and tell ZBrush to hide the placement of these fibers or these nanomesh, which are fibers, in just by clicking in show placement. So if I turn this off, now we don't see the planes, we only see the fibers, right? So that is super cool because we can now go back to the groom hair short, right? And even though we have fibers that look like curly fibers and all that, when we manipulate or when we try to groom these fibers, we're not actually grooming the fiber itself. We're grooming just the planes where the fiber is sitting. So we have the best of both worlds. So we have all the ability to randomize and tweak things from the nanomesh, but the actual brush that is a fiber mesh is not being affected. So all I'm doing here is, so I can just do this, and you'll see I'm just manipulating the different planes. So this is an incredibly powerful technique to get a lot of control using FiberMesh and Nanomesh. Right. So all I'm doing here is just tweaking the planes that are kind of like hosting the fibers, right? Which are not even fibers; they're just an insert mesh. So you can potentially replace it with anything that you want. So if you want a more stylized version of this, like the original version of this design that is more stylized and like thicker fibers, then you can just go for it. Right? So if you look at let's just go into solo mode. So I'm starting to groom this and get a more intentional flow of these fibers, but they're not fibers. So I can, if I want, I can just go show placement, right? And I turn on the nanomesh, you'll see this is what's happening. So I can keep refining this, just the planes, and all I'm doing is manipulating the placement of that thing. So hopefully that makes sense. Way to get to this point, like the technique, but it's not that complicated, to be honest. Just once you get the hang of it, you create a whole different effects that are pretty cool using Nanomesh and FiberMesh. All Another thing that I just thought that might be interesting for you, which I haven't tried, but again, based on the theory, I reckon it could be a good thing. Yeah, I've never tried it, but you're welcome to. Which is basically we have each one of these planes, right? Which is FiberMesh, just a single plane. You can grow these with a UV, right? So when you grow them, you select any texture and you create a UV map for each one of these planes. So that means that when we have, in theory, like I said, I haven't tried this, but it might be something worth trying. If you take the fibers, which are an insert brush that we created, so all these things that sit into a single polygon, right? And this is just FiberMesh slash insert mesh, right? Potentially, if you have UVs in these type of planes, what you could do is do all the grooming that you want, and ultimately you're not moving these fibers from the plane, you're just moving the plane. So the fibers will stay relatively close to the plane. So in theory, if they're not, if you're not going out of this plane with the fibers, which you can tweak from the Nanomesh settings again, you could project all of those fibers into the UVs or into the single planes. So each one of these planes, if they have UVs, could actually have fibers as a normal map, and that would be a way to export it to a game engine or something like that. I haven't tried it, but I know that you can get UVs. I know what these things are sitting, so I'm thinking it could be one of the ways, and I might try it later and see if that works and let you guys know. But just thought would be an interesting thing. All right, so let's just wrap this one up here. Again, I'm gonna turn on Nanomesh and show placement. Get out of solo, and that's just another way of going about it. So I'm gonna do a quick render and just check the chat if you guys have any questions about that mess of a technique that I just showed you. But it's pretty powerful. Like once you get the hang of it, you can do a lot of different things with it. Oops, let me just do that again without polyframe. Hey, Capirotao, Fricano, Capiroto. How you guys going? All right. So as you can see, I don't know if that's obvious, but it looks quite detailed, and it's just a brush being instanced. So it's a super powerful thing. Get closer to see the final result. Let's do another render. It probably won't have the properties of the fibers, so you don't have the same like I showed you before with the FiberMesh. When ZBrush render FiberMesh, it automatically, or if you set it at the time of render, it will smooth out the fibers. But because these are not fibers anymore, we turn that into an insert brush. You lose that ability of rendering it as as a more smooth thing. But I think this one works quite well. Actually, I think I'm liking it even more than the other version. Although it doesn't really go with the style. Let's see. I'm going to turn this one off just to compare it actually, and let me know what you guys think. So I'm going to put this one on the side here, right? Shift S, just drop it into the canvas, and I'm going to change or enable the other one, which should be this one. I kind of like this one, the one that we just did with the other technique, but I think the original has more personality. I mean, it goes more with the design, so I'm just gonna stick with that. But anyway, I just wanted to show you a different technique, right? Cool. So Control N pretty cool. I think this technique is hopefully it's helpful for you guys. Now the next thing I wanted to do was that type like necklace thing, and I'm going to show you another technique of how to go about it. Oh, before I do that, actually, let me. Where are we? Where are we? I really need to start naming things. All right. Yeah. So the stitches that you can see here, they're pretty rough. Like I didn't spend too much time placing them. You'll see that they're kind of like randomly placed. They're not like it's hard to identify the pattern, and that is all because I created a single little strand and created a bunch of different insert meshes with different rotations and stuff like that. And then I created an insert mesh, and then I turned that into a curve brush, and I created that brush to be random. So that's what I'm going to show you for the necklace, but that's basically what I did here. So if you want to recreate this, just follow the steps that I'm going to show you for a different piece, but that's what I did in here. And it's just, you just draw one single curve and you get all of these different things. Another cool thing about this is that they will have separate polyframes, right? So you could, if you want to be very precise, afterwards, once you place this curve, which is really easy, just takes a few minutes. Once you have the curve, you can go with something like the move topological brush, and well, with the move topological brush, you don't really have to have different polyframes. But you know, let's say that I don't want this one here anymore. I can just hold Control and Shift to select that, invert the selection, and then I can just go ahead and delete hidden. That's it, right? So I can do another pass of finally manually refine the placement of these things. So that's really cool, and I'm going to show you the way that I created this to place this in a curve and generating all these meshes randomly. But I'm going to do that with a more complex, kind of like a necklace type of artifact, which I think is going to be more interesting than showing you a bunch of stitches. All right. Cool. So let's just work on a different tool. Let me think what would be the best way. I'm gonna load in actually a reference. So that is stream 14. Just trying to figure out where I put it. Here we go. So this one, send it to my thing here, my lightbox, no, spotlight. All right, cool. So the idea is to create this type of necklace with all these different, I don't know, rocks and gems, whatever these things are, and I'm gonna create a bunch of them. Maybe, how are we with time? Oh, we have plenty of time today. We actually done things today. So I'm gonna show you a few of these, how I can create these very quickly. A bunch of like Nanomesh techniques that you already know probably, and then turn that into a curve or an insert curve to create the necklace. So I'm gonna start creating the objects that I wanna place in the curve. So I'm gonna go to probably a cube will be okay. Turn that into a Polymesh 3D, and I'm gonna reduce the size of this just a tiny bit so that the Dynamesh by default that I have, it's not as much. So enable Dynamesh, right? I think that will be okay. Cool. So I want to start with, actually, I'm gonna duplicate this one. So I have an original cube that I can keep duplicated and do other shapes. And I'm going to take that one, and I'm actually going to start working on a kind of like a gem type of shape. So I'm going to use probably the clip curve will be the best one. And I'm going to start clipping things around, right? So the side of the curve that has the shadow is the one that is going to be clipped, right? So I get this. Let me turn this off. I get this type of thing, right? I'm going to go creating a very sharp. I'm destroying basically the cube. But this, oops, this is a quick way to create this type of gems, stones, or whatever this is. All right, I'm gonna run Dynamesh again. Control, click and drag. Maybe I need a bit more resolution, you know, just a tiny bit more. Control, click and drag. There we go. When you're doing this type of thing, just make sure that you, like if you're following along, make sure that you check from every angle, because this might look very interesting, but it gets to a point that if you rotate, you'll see the shape of the square quite a bit, and that's when you start, you know, tweaking the shapes a bit more from every angle. All right, so that this kind of rock looks all right. I'm gonna turn on the floor so that I can see where I am. There we go. See here, this looks pretty squarish, so we can go ahead and tweak these like so. One thing that you need to be aware of, or if you don't know about it, with the clip brushes, is they're great, but you won't be able to do like a very clean curve. So if you drag, Control Shift, click and drag to create the curve, you can hold Shift by the Control Shift, click and drag. You can create the curve. If you press the space bar, you move the entire curve, so just to reposition it. But if you want to create like a more, not a line, but a curve, you can hold the Alt key at any point, and when you click Alt, it's just going to create a point there and allows you to do this kind of like Bezier curve, right? So if I try to do something like this, just to cut it, I'm going to do another point here, so Alt like that, right? If I do that, in this case it did a good job. Anyway, I was just gonna say that be careful with the clip brushes, because sometimes it doesn't give you a perfect, you know, cut, depending on the angle that you use. But in that case, it worked. All right, so that's. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this one. What I'll do is run Dynamesh again, and then I'm gonna bring in my trim dynamic brush, and I'm just gonna refine some of the edges so that it's not as perfect. Not all of them, just some areas, just to make mix things around a little bit. And this trim dynamic brush will help you to create a more, you know, natural effect in these like chips or chipped areas of the stone. If it is a stone, I don't know what this is really. I'm going for like a gem type of thing, or like a crystal. All right. Cool. So there it is. And just to add like the final touches, I mean, this is like super simple. You can spend as much time in this. This is gonna be pretty tiny anyway. Just to add the final touches, I can just go ahead and run a clay polish, and that's just gonna sharpen all of those details that we just did with the trim dynamic. Be careful when you use the clay polish. ZBrush actually applies, well, it does the polish, but it also applies a mask around the borders. That's kind of like the process that it's doing. So I don't know if you can see it there on the stream, but there's actually some of this mesh. So if I were to inflate or deflate, that's going to be obvious, right? And so it just creates this effect because the edges of this is being masked by the clay polish process. So that's just something to be aware of, and it's also a technique if you want to create this type of effect, like cracked edges, and you know, which is not too bad. I actually don't mind it when I do that. Maybe we can do it a little bit more thorough than what I just did there. If we deflate it, it's going to be the opposite, obviously, but maybe just a tiny bit. It's not too bad, right? Control, click and drag to remove the mask, and we can go ahead and do a Dynamesh again. Nah, let's just leave it like that. Or if you want to keep these details, you can increase the Dynamesh resolution, but I think it looks alright as it is. Yeah, let's just leave that one there because we have to do a few more. I'm going to duplicate the original cube, turn that one off, turn that one off. So with this one, I want to do, let's turn on solo. I want to turn on symmetry, And this one I want to do kind of like the same thing, but like a rounded shape. So I guess the easiest way to turn this cube into a more rounded shape would be just to show you something different from the deformers. I'm going to select the project primitive, right? And I'm just going to scale this up. So ZBrush is projecting a sphere, like the primitive that I'm projecting is a sphere over this square. So that's kind of like an interesting shape, but I want to keep these two areas kind of like flat. So with these little points, I can just click and drag, and you'll see ZBrush is gonna, flatten this area. If I want to do it symmetrically on both sides, I can hold Shift, and it's just gonna do it at the same time, which is pretty cool. Let's just scale it a bit more. And it's not giving me like a perfect, like very straight line, because there is a bit of opacity, not opacity, yeah, opacity and blend. So the pink ones. So this one here, the one from the actual project primitive, this looks very complex, but it's not. Once you get the hang of it, it's really, really cool. In fact, there is I have in the ZBrush guides, there is a guide dedicated to this specific modifier just for this one, because it's really powerful. So if you want to learn more about it, I'll explain in that guide. I explain all the different cones and stuff. So go ahead and check that out if you want. But basically, I can just tweak the opacity here of the effect, and then the blend between the project primitive and the actual mesh. So I'm just gonna go for something like that. So I just basically turn that cube into this, but you have a lot of different effects that you can, or not effects, controls that let you change this shape quite a bit. So I'm gonna click accept, the cog icon, and accept. There we go, and I'm gonna run Nanomesh once more. So that's kind of like what I wanted. So now that I have this here, I want to maybe bring in the trim dynamic, and I'm just gonna do with large brushes. Just gonna clip this in some areas. Again, just try to make it very, like if it's a piece of wood or something that the character just took and built himself. This is the whole point of the character. What I'm trying to do is just make it look very rough, like all the pieces that, all the clothes and all the accessories is something that he did himself. We could use the surface noise as well in this case to do something similar to what we did for the mask. And I think for the mask we did that in the third or in the second episode of this series of this character. Don't remember. But yeah, we used a technique to create this kind of like chipwood effect. Cool. Maybe let's do a little bit more with a smaller brush just around the borders. Again, I don't want a perfect cut in here. Alright, let's go ahead and do similar thing to what we did with the gemstone, but I'm just going to run a clay polish, clear that out. This time I'm not going to use the edge mask. I'm going to actually undo that, increase the resolution a tiny bit, click and drag, and then clay polish. So we have more resolution to play around with. Clear the mask. That is an automatic process from the clay polish. And then just do a bit of refinement here. Not too much. Alright. So I think this one is looking alright. I mean, I'm putting way too much time in these things, and they're gonna be relatively small. Control click and drag. Do one clay polish. Alright, so there we go. So we have a couple of kind of like gemstones, interesting ones. I'm gonna do a few more. Let's duplicate that cube. We can use the project primitive to create a bunch of different things, but I'm just gonna keep it simple. So this one, I'm just gonna use another technique that you can use for this type of thing. Would be Sculptris Pro. I'm gonna turn on symmetry, hold Shift, and because I have a large brush, let me just turn on polyframe so you see what's happening. I can just do this type of thing. Right, I'm gonna bring in the gizmo, squish that like so, and then I can bring my move brush, make sure that I have AccuCurve enable, and I still have my smooth brush with Sculptris Pro. So I can use that as a way to maintain my resolution in check, or the amount of polygons in check. So I just want to create a kind of like a triangular shape, and this is going to be one of the the main ones, or the main shapes, really. So if this one's going to be a larger one, we can spend a little bit more time here, but not too much. So basically, I'm just showing you the different techniques of achieving very similar results just to create these very simple objects. So this is just another one with the Sculptris Pro, which is awesome. Let's turn on polyframe, right? If we want to refine this a tiny bit more, let's go ahead and run a clay polish as well. Brilliant. So I think that's working fine. In fact, we can actually, I'm going to bring in the Gizmo 3D. I'm bringing the taper deformer. I just want it to be a little bit fatter at the top, like wider here. So I can just take this cone, and again, this is the taper deformer. Scale that up as a tiny bit, and use the wide one to just control how much of it I'm using. And I'm going to make it more pointy towards the bottom. Click OK, and let's just tweak the shape a little bit. All right. We can use another deformer to just make it a little bit more like curvy, I guess that's the word. I'm going to use a soft deformer, or deformer soft, and this one is pretty cool. I'm going to turn off perspective, and it allows you to move this holding control and creating or masking areas to mask out these points. You can just move things around like so. So I'm going to mask these. Mask these points. Control, click and drag, and then holding Alt to invert that selection. And I'm gonna scale this. Oops. Hang on. What am I doing? I want to select all of them. All right, all the points in the middle, and sorry about that. I'm gonna scale them in the x-axis, kind of like that. All right. This is just very subtle tweaking the shape. All right, cool. So let's leave that one there. I'm gonna do just maybe one more, and then I'll show you the process. Hello from Spain. Hello, Canguro Viajero. How's everyone going? Good to have you guys here. So we're just in the middle of creating a bunch of gemstones, or like little simple objects to place around the collar or the necklace of the character. All right, so with this, let's just keep it simple. Let's make 4 of these ones. We can duplicate and do more, but I'm gonna take this one and do, let's say, you know what? We can keep this one simple. We can just make it a square or a cube. So I'm gonna scale it in the x-axis. Something around there. And then I'm gonna rotate it just a bit. Control click and drag to reDynamesh, maybe add a little bit more resolution. Control click and drag, there we go. And I want to bring in this time, I mean, you can use the trim dynamic, but I'm going to try the edge polish. That's going to be more like a harsh effect, not with the Sculptris Pro. There we go. So that's the edge polish is going to respect a little bit more those edges. So I'm not trying to create that chipped effect in the other pieces, but rather polish some of these areas while creating a bit of a variation in the surface. So this is just the edge polish, nothing more. Right, so it maintains those very sharp edges, but as I just randomly use this brush, you'll see it just creates a bit of a wobbly effect, makes it look a little more organic, and that's what I'm going for. We can bring in the trim dynamic again, and with a smaller brush, I'm just gonna tweak the edges a bit. We can run Dynamesh again, just tweak the edges a bit, and the corners maybe, just to fine tune this shape. This doesn't look like much just yet, but I promise it will make sense. All right. Control click and drag, and then clay polish again. So we have these stones that are pretty simple, but once we combine them together and we create the brush, it's gonna look a little bit better, I hope. All right. So let's get out of solo mode, and what I need to do now is make sure that they all fit within like a single or like a. I want them all to fit within a space, and so that I can create kind of like a string also attached to it. So let me show you what I mean. The idea here is to keep anything that I do with these shapes within this range, right? Let's say that this is a square. If I keep everything within this range, then I can create another mesh or another mesh to be like the string or the thread or whatever is tying all these things together. And if I create that, let's say from this point, it's not going to be as thin, but so you get the idea. I can just cut it here at this point, right? And if I add this little piece of string, whatever this is, this tube, if I add one of these to each one of these meshes, right? When we turn this into a curve brush, it's just gonna start. It's gonna start here, and it's gonna finish here, right? So what the curve brush is gonna do is it's gonna take the start again and start again from here. So it's gonna create another one here, and another one here, and another one here, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the theory. So I'm gonna take each one of those brushes and convert it into these little pieces of a larger necklace, and then we can just draw and create whatever we want, and that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and do a quick save just in case I haven't done that. Have a sip of water. I don't know if you guys have any questions. If you have anything at all that you want to ask, regardless of whether it's for this technique that I'm showing you or what I showed you in previous stream, feel free to ask. Yeah, so your questions are kind of like the driving force of these streams anyway. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and if I know the answer, I'm happy to answer them as well. So one of the things that you guys were asking a few streams ago were like how to do FiberMesh and how to play with FiberMesh and things like that, and therefore the stuff and the techniques that I show you in the past couple of streams have been about that. So if you have any other question about that, feel free to ask, and I'm happy to show you, provided that that I know the answer. But I'm also happy to test things that I don't know and see if I can find an answer for you. All right. So one more thing I want to do just to finalize these shapes would be to let's go ahead and append. Where are we? Append a cylinder, right? So I'm going to select that cylinder, and I'm going to rotate it, holding Shift 90 degrees, scale it down, and scale it in the y-axis, and scale it down again. So this is going to be like the string. You can make it very complex. In fact, you can, let's see, you can have multiple of these tubes, or multiple tubes, creating a string, as long as the start point and the end point are in the same place. Like you don't touch those, you can just you can go crazy in the middle, right? Just maintain the start and the end, so this point and this point in the same place, so that when you create the curve, is gonna repeat along the lines, well, along the curve properly. All right, so maybe scale this a bit more. So this is gonna be the string, right? And this is going to be the gap between the stones. So hopefully that's gonna make sense in just a second, but yeah. All right. So what I want to do in this case is I'm going to duplicate this. So duplicate, and this I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call this string, whatever this is, a string, right? And this other one, so I'm going to turn this off for the time being. This other one is going to be a boolean that I'm going to use to create a hole for all of these ones. So I'm going to scale this up a tiny bit, so that we have a little bit of gap between the actual hole that I'm going to create and this string itself. And I'm going to turn this into a boolean. So I'm going to click on this little icon here, which it's telling ZBrush to use this to boolean out or extract, or subtract anything that is in this volume from these other volumes on top. The reason you cannot see it is because I don't have it enabled, so I'm just going to go to live booleans. This little mesh is creating that hole all around these shapes. So with this enabled, what I can do is one by one, I'm going to turn this off, and one by one I can reposition it to find the place of that hole. So this square, you'll see I can move the square and the hole is going to stay in one place, which is not a hole, it's just the cylinder that we're using as a boolean. So let's go ahead and do something like that. So that's kind of like a cool shape, or you can just put it in the center. Actually, that's not too bad. Let's just leave it like that. Great. Let's do the second one. This is going to be in place. All right, so something like that. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. I want it to be pointing this way, and then reposition it like so. Maybe scale it up a bit. So this is going to be one of the main shapes, so actually could be bigger. I want to create a little bit of contrast between the different types of shapes, or like the size that I'm using, because you have to kind of determine the size from this point when you're creating the curves, just because you won't be able to do it afterwards, like within the curve. So let's just reduce this one a bit. And actually, I'm going to duplicate that one. Just create another one that's going to be slightly bigger and a little bit flatter, like so. And I'm going to rotate it as well, just so that when I place it, it's not going to look the same. And finally, this one, this little rock. So this little rock, we can just make it hang from this point. Okay, that's it. Cool. So what I'll do now is I'm going to use one of the awesome features in ZBrush 2019, which are folders, to create all of these within this tool. So I'm doing another quick save just in case. And I'm going to create a folder. Let's call this one Boolean. Chuck that one on top here. And I'm just going to click and drag and put all this inside. This one doesn't matter. It's not going to be part of it. Right. So actually, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's just go ahead and try it. So I'm going to click on the cog icon, and I'm going to click on Boolean folder, and ZBrush is going to Boolean. Yeah. So I knew this was going to happen, but it's alright. Basically, it just took that Boolean mesh that we created, that string, and created the hole for all of this. Right? So you see all of the pieces have this hole. The only problem is that now they're combined into one, because I didn't, like, I should have separated them into folders, but it's not a big deal, because they all should have different polyframes. So because they don't, there's hang on, no, that's not gonna work. Let's delete that, and let's do it again. So I'm gonna do it one at a time, just so that it works. So let's click on Boolean. Right, so we have the first one, which, yep, this one. So I'm gonna do the second one, Boolean. The third one, Boolean. And one more, two more, Boolean. And the last one, Boolean. Alright, so the reason I had to do it one at a time is so that they're not combined, because the Boolean operation within a folder, if you have this, which by default it is additive, or like merging things together, it's just going to give you a single mesh, which is not what I want. Cool. So now that I have all of them, I just need to check. Ah, there we go. I just had selected something. Cool, so I can go into solo mode and let's just check all of them. Great. That's exactly what I want. I'm just gonna give them individual polygroup. So Control W to each one of them, just to assign a different polygroup, so that we can manipulate them later on from the curve. Perfect. Let's turn on this one. Turn off solo, and you'll see this is the effect. I think I'm gonna delete this string, and I'm just gonna reduce the poly count a little bit, just so that it's easier. Game Launcher is asking what are we creating? We're creating like a bunch of gemstones and pieces to create a necklace in a curve that's gonna be placed randomly, or it's gonna place these elements randomly across the neck of the character, which this is the character. And we're gonna use it, and it's a similar technique, or a very similar technique to what I use for the stitching pattern here. Yeah, so like I said, I wanna reduce the size of the amount of polygons in this string. So what I can do is click on the tool palette, on the tool thumbnail, click on cylinder, and this is still a primitive. So what I can do is go to the initialize palette at the bottom, and we can tweak the amount of polygons. So we can reduce actually the size from here, which just saves us a couple of steps. So I'm going to set this to 10 and 10, right? And then I'm going to reduce the amount of polygons by the H divide is going to reduce the amount of maybe 6 is fine, and the V divide is going to be also pretty minimal, just because the curve is going to be given by the duplication of this. So if you look very close, this is going to be a straight line. We can actually tweak it a little bit, and just maybe that's going to be helpful. But anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that this is going to look straight, right, in the actual curve or curve brush, and here's going to be the gemstone. So the curvature, when we draw the curve, is going to be given by multiple straight lines, right? So this is not going to be as smooth. We have these very sharp points. So something that I just thought that we could do is give it a little bit of a curvature here, so that when we draw it, it just creates this. But I don't know if that's going to be good. So let's just keep it simple. I just tweak the initialize settings, and let's go ahead and click Make Polymesh 3D. That's it. And I'm going to copy this tool, and I'm going to go to my working file here, and I'm going to paste it. Right? So we can delete this one. We don't need it. That was the one that ultimately we use as a boolean. Shift rotate 90 degrees. Cool. And yeah, let's just leave it like that. That seems to be a good place for the string. The length of the string is the string is going to determine the gap between each gemstone, right? So basically, this length between this gemstone and the end of the string is going to be double, right? Because it's going to be exactly the same as this. So when you draw the next one, it's going to be like that. So the gap between a gemstone is going to be, 2x. Just something to keep in mind when you're designing the actual curve. Cool. I think we're pretty much ready to go to start creating. One more thing is, let's go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this a few times. So I have to create one of these strings for each gemstone. I'm just going to put it underneath each one of those. I need to create one more. Right? So each one of these stones or gemstones or whatever this is, I'm going to make sure that they also have the string. So when they're drawn in the curve, they're going to have the string. Is the character going to be used for something, or is it just for the sake of this guide portfolio? It's just yeah, it's just for you guys. Like, I might tweak it later on, and if I have time, refine it and just finalize it. But it's just it's just a character that gives me the opportunity to play around with a bunch of different techniques, which is what I'm trying to show you. But yeah, I'm not gonna use it for anything else. So I haven't thought about it really. All right. All right, so the next step would be to make sure or to optimize these gemstones so that when we draw them, they're not gonna be like full of geometry. And that is pretty simple. I'm just gonna select this mesh, go into solo mode. Let's click quick save. So yeah, I just wanna optimize this a little bit. And at this point, you can actually run a Nanomesh again if you wanted to, with a bit more resolution. We're gonna optimize this quite a bit, so it doesn't matter. And then with the trim dynamic, you can just refine these gaps that we created with the boolean. Cool, and smooth that out a little bit. All right, and then clay polish, control click and drag. All right, so that's just a quick refinement in there, not too thorough, but you know what I mean. So we can go to, let's turn this on, change material, go to the plugin palette, and I'm gonna dog that to the right, and go to the decimation master. Right, so this is the one that allows us to maintain the volumes and the sharpness of the edges and all that, but reduce the poly count quite a bit. So just so you know, I have my active points here in my UI. So just keep an eye on there if you want to see the change. So right now I have a 70,000. I'm gonna pre-process current, so this button here, and ZBrush is gonna analyze this mesh. And now that it's analyzed, I can just tell ZBrush I want to reduce this by 20%. Actually, I want to reduce it by 10%, right? So select the percentage here, and then click decimation or decimate current, and you'll see, for the most part, it just maintained the shape quite, like actually really good. And I think we can even reduce this even more. So I'm gonna set it to 5, decimate current. Even more. It's not too bad. Let's go for 2. All right. So with 2, you start to see like the faceted polygons here, but I don't mind. I think it just gives character to the whole thing. If you don't want to see this, just maintain this slider, more than that. But we went from 70,000 polygons to 1,000. So that is pretty good for what we want to do, which is an insert mesh. Cool. I'm just gonna click. I'm gonna click on these arrows. I screwed up. Hang on. Where were we? I lost track of what I was doing. All right. So with the arrow keys, I can just go and cycle through the different subtools. I'm just clicking down to select this one, and I'm gonna do the same thing. Increase the resolution. Dynamesh it with the trim dynamic. This one has symmetry, so I can just, save some time by enable symmetry and tweaking this. Right, then turn off symmetry and then just work a little bit more on each side just to break up that pattern. It's not fully symmetrical in this case because remember we use Sculpt Pro. All right, turn off these. And let's go to the decimation master again, pre-process current. If you have multiple of these, you can actually use the pre-process all, and then it will just run the decimation pre-process process through all the subtools, and just save you some time. This one I'm gonna go for 5% decimate. That's pretty good. All right, happy with that. Let's keep going. This one as well. Increase the resolution, Dynamesh. Just fine tune these edges a bit. And with the smooth brush, cool. And let's go ahead and do preprocess current. Oops, I should have not done that. All right, let's just do it again. Preprocess current. That's not what I wanted to do. All right, decimate current. There we go. So that's pretty good. Keep going. Again, increase Nanomesh. Just a bit of a smooth brush and the trim dynamic. Cool. And preprocess current. So yeah, this becomes a bit repetitive, but we have to do it because decimate current. Otherwise, we'll have too many polygons to create the insert mesh. And this is the final one. So I'm going to increase the dynamic resolution of this one quite a bit, just so that we can keep a little bit of those, a little bit of those indentations. We're going to lose a few of those, but it's fine. Cool. I made a mistake in there, but you won't see it. All right. So this one, let's go ahead and do a clay polish again, and let's do an inflate. Just see if we can recover some of these details. Tiny bit more. No, let's not do that. It's not good. Yeah, I think that looks all right. Let's go ahead and pre-process that one. And we're going to reduce it from 200,000 polygons to 3,000. So decimate current, 10,000. Let's do a little bit less. We can get away with 2%, I guess. Yeah, that's good. Great. So let's get out of solo mode. Now we have decimated all our meshes. I'm gonna get rid of that one. Get rid of that. Cool. So now we have this working file. All we have to do is merge the string that's gonna ultimately have the same polygroups, and yeah, we're just gonna merge that and with each one of these gemstones. So I'm gonna click the first one, and it's gonna merge it down with this little string. So merge down, click OK. Second one, merge down, click OK. Merge down, click OK. Merge down, click OK, and the last one, merge down, click OK. Phew, alright, so that took a while, but basically we have like 5 different gemstones that are like, hanging from this little string. That's the whole point, right? If you wanted to make things a little bit more interesting, you can just combine a few. I'm gonna keep it simple again, but just to show you, you could take this one, for example, and isolate it. Remember, we have polygroups, so we can just hold Control, click, and Shift on this one. Control, Shift, and click on that one, and then just split it. So just for the sake of demonstration, I'm just gonna duplicate this one. I can even do it within the same one. So I'm gonna hold Control, click, and Shift on this one. Right? Click Control outside in the canvas so that masks this out. Control Shift click to bring back that. Control click to invert that selection and bring in the gizmo, center that pivot, and I'm just gonna scale this like that, maybe rotate it a tiny bit. I'm just gonna move this around, and if I hold Control within this subtool, I'm gonna duplicate it within the subtool. Right? So that allows you to, if I were doing this a little bit more thoroughly, I'll probably work like this. I'm gonna actually create a polygroup, so auto groups. Hang on a second. It's because I have my clip brush selected, not the select rectangular. There we go. Control click, create a mask for that one. Right, so yeah, if I wanted to spend a little bit more time, I would probably do this a bit more thoroughly like I'm doing with this one for all of them. But just so you guys know, that's the process. All right. So, like I said, keep in mind that the size of this little tube is going to determine the gap between each gem. So there's going to be a gap this size between this one and the next one, whatever the next one is, right? So if the next one is this one, which is a little bit bigger, then obviously the gap is going to be less, and so on and so forth. So if you want to play around with that, you could just take the little strings and then just reduce the size. But again, I'm going to keep it simple, and let's go ahead and create our brush. So all this build up has been to just create a simple curve brush that is going to have a necklace. But the cool thing is that I'm going to show you how to randomize things along the curve. So that's pretty cool. All right. So what we have to do now, once we have created these pieces, is create an insert brush. So I'm going to click, or a multi-insert brush. So I'm going to click the brush thumbnail, go here to the Create Insert Multi-Mesh, click on that, and you'll see. I should have thought about that because we have meshes within the booleans. It's also taking into account those. So I'm going to delete the boolean mesh. Yes. Okay. All right. So now we lost the originals, but it doesn't matter. We don't need those at all. So let's go ahead and create insert multi-mesh again. All right. So now we have in this IMM picker or selector, we have only these subtools, not the ones that we had in the folder before. Cool. So this is just the normal insert mesh. Let's go ahead and click on a plane 3D. This is the one that we used for the fibers before, or one of them. And we can use this kind of like a playground to test this brush. So I'm going to click and drag, and you'll see that's what's happening. That's great. Let's do the other one. Yep, so all of them are working in the same direction that I wanted. So that's pretty good. And that's just an insert brush. All we have to do to convert this into a curve brush is select the one that we want to create a curve from. So I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to take this stroke palette, dog that to the right. And in the stroke palette, we have this curve, which we can just turn it into curve mode, and that's it. We just click and drag, and oops, I forgot to mention this. The way that you create the curve, the angle of the camera is going to have a huge impact in how it's going to be drawn. So that's not too bad, but that's not what I want. So let's go back to that one, and that's the one. Yep. So I'm going to rotate this around like this, maybe like this, right? So hopefully this will change. I'm going to create a new multi-mesh insert brush. All right, so you'll see now this brush has like all the tubes kind of like in a vertical fashion. So if I go back to the plane, right, let's try that again. Select this one, go to the curve mode, and click and drag. That's a little bit better. I'm going to increase the size of my brush, and you'll see that we have this thing repeated along the curve. All right, so that's not too bad. We can lock the start so that we can move things around like so. That's good. And we can do a few things to improve this brush, or this curve brush. The first thing I want to do is, you'll notice when I rotate around, there's like kind of like gaps in between. We can tweak that from the brush palette. So let's go to the brush palette and go to modifiers. And in the modifiers, we have a few options. So here we have the IMM selector, which is before this thing existed. We had this little thing here, which you can just click and select from this palette, right? And ZBrush assigns a letter or a number, whatever that is, just a sequence from A to F in this case for each, a letter for each one of these pieces. And we're going to use this in just a second, but basically what I want to do is make sure that this first one, or the first mesh that I'm using, I'm going to change the curve resolution to something like 20. Click on it again, and that's just going to, you'll see, soften this quite a bit. I'm going to make sure well points is enabled as well as stretch. So when I click on this to update it, you'll get this very curvy line right? So that's much better, right? So that looks more natural, and that is all between the effects of the weld points to weld each. I'm just, in case you don't know about it. So weld points is just gonna weld these points in between each instance of the brush, right? The stretch is gonna, it's not gonna be very visible here, so don't worry about that one. But it's not gonna be visible because we have a pretty distinctive shape within the center of the string, so it's not gonna be very visible. And the curve resolution is basically giving us this very nice and soft curve. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so that's all good. The only thing is that if you have a insert multi-mesh brush and you turn that into a curve, you need to do all these curve settings in the brush palette for each one of the instances or each one of these meshes that you have within the brush, right? So let's go ahead and do that. The only number that we need to remember is the curve resolution set to 20, which is pretty good. So I'm going to select the next one from this selector, right? And you see it also gets selected here. You can do it from any of those sides. And as soon as I change between these, you see all of these settings are independent. So that's a really good thing, because you can have completely different options depending on the mesh that you select. So you can have one that has more resolution, a curve with more resolution, and so on. So I'm going to select this one, weld point, stretch, and set it to 20. So I'm going to click on the, this is another thing. If I click on the curve that I draw and I have a different mesh, ZBrush is going to update it. So I'm going to click on that and it just gets updated like so, right? And keep working on it. So that one is working as well, pretty good. I'm going to do the next one. Weld point, stretch, curve at 20. Click to update. This one is working very nicely. Let's do the next one. Weld point, stretch, curve at 20. Click to update. Also pretty good. The next one, weld, stretch, curve at 20. Click to update. Whoa. All right, so that one, I don't know that one is not working for some reason. Oh, hang on a second. I think I know what this one is giving me some problems. Yeah, so I might not use this one, to be honest, because I think this one, what's happening with this one is that we split it and we left it as with a mask, so it's just actually creating only one. Yeah, all right, that's not a big deal. We're just gonna avoid this one. In order to do that, in order to delete this one, I mean, it shouldn't be a problem. Let me just think about it. Why is it drawing it? It's only drawing one. Let me go back. That's an interesting one. Not sure why that is happening. Let's go back to this thing. Oh, that's why. I think so. I think that's the reason. I have more than, right. So I have different polygroups than the other ones. I wonder if that makes any difference. I'm gonna, just for the sake of trying it, I'm gonna assign a polygroup to this by itself. And I'm gonna go to the brush palette. And where is my, here, the create palette. So I think we can just delete this mesh, the selected one. So I'm gonna delete mesh. So it's gone, right? And I have my original set of tools with all of the pieces, and I have this in solo mode. So I'm just gonna re-add this to this insert brush. So I'm gonna click on the brush and I'm gonna click on create insert mesh. I just want this single one, but I don't want to create a new one. I want to append it. So I'm gonna append that, and I click OK. So now I just have it back in here. Let's see if that fixes the problem. I just had different polygroups. Not entirely sure if that's gonna do anything, but we'll see. Alright, so with that one selected, I'm gonna click. There we go. Yeah, so there was just a problem with the polygrouping. It's all good. Now let's go ahead and click weld point, stretch, curve at 20, update. There we go. All right, so that's working. We have one more, which is this one, right? Well point, stretch, curve at 20, click to update, and there we go. All right, so this is great because again we can take out 2 points. I'm going to show you a really cool technique. Let's say that this is the body of the character, right? I just want to place the this is the beginning, I think. Yeah. So if we go to the stroke palette, how will we time? Ooh, we have like 20 minutes. Yeah, I reckon I'll finish this and we'll wrap it up here, guys. So if you have any questions so far about this process and all that, feel free to ask, and I'll check the chat in just a second. But we have about 20 minutes, so I'll finish this random generator of you know, it's gonna look a little bit more complex, and then we'll wrap it up there. So in the stroke palette, you have the lock start and lock end. So if you click those, you can move the curve around, and the start and the end are gonna be locked, but you can still move this independently. So I would just draw the curve, right, and then set the points, the start and the end, where you want them, something like that, and then I would just go with elastic or liquid, probably liquid in this case, right, and I just pull this, and the liquid is gonna, as you can see here, is gonna create more of those as I push it. So that's super handy, right? So let's say that this is my colored, not my color, my keep calling it colored, my necklace with all the gems. You can also increase the curve steps. I'm just gonna leave it like that. As it is. Cool. So this is really good because you can, once you have this in place, like your curve is there, you can select a different one, click to update, and that's just gonna change the type of necklace that you're adding, right? And that's the whole point. Now, this is good, but it's not the end of the technique that I was going to show you, because the reason I created a whole bunch of different stones is that I don't have to, you know, manually do that or have a very obvious pattern here. Instead, what I want to do is create like a more random pattern around the necklace. So to do that, and that's the cool part of this technique, is let's go to the brush palette here on the modifiers, right? So I'm just gonna actually create this. So I'm gonna split on mask points, and I'm gonna go, and in the tool palette, here we go, I'm gonna turn this off just so that you can see the difference later. Cool. So what I want to do is randomize the placement of these pieces into the curve. So we have these really cool these cool sliders here. So we have this multi-mesh select slider. So if I just go to 1, 2, 3, whatever, I should have 6 or 5. Well, 6 including 0. So 0 is number 1 really. So from 0 to 5, I'm basically selecting which one of these. So this will be 0. If I go to 2, it will be this one, and 5 will be this, right? So this slider allows you to select the different meshes. So it's really good to have it as a slider, because if you're more advanced, if you know a little bit more of the scripting or macros in ZBrush, you can utilize this slider to, you know, do a bunch of stuff like randomize things. I don't know. It's just good that it's as a slider, so you can just have more control over stuff. But what I want to do is actually play with the variation slider, and as soon as I change variation, I will have variation selection or selector. So if I turn variation to 2, or let's say 3, right? ZBrush is gonna look at all of the meshes that I have here. Hang on, should I put this one? I'm just looking at my screen on the other side so that I don't cover the comments on your screen. Cool. So with a variation of 3, ZBrush is gonna take whatever I have selected, which in this case is the number 0, or this one, right? And it's gonna variate 3 times, or it's gonna variate 3 instances of that brush. So 1, 2, and 3, right? In theory. So with this variation, it's gonna variate between these 3 brushes. Now, if I take this variation and, sorry, the variation selection, and this one has 3 different variations. Yeah, so with a variation of 3, it's just going to cycle through these 3 different ones, or if, in fact, if I just select this one, then ZBrush is going to take that one and then do it forward. So 1, 2, and 3, right? And that is the way that it does it. The way that ZBrush knows that it needs to go forward in the amount of meshes that you have is because of this, where are we? This variation selection. So if I set this to 3 again, right? Here we need to determine how ZBrush is going to analyze this and variate it. So for, let's say, 1 is going to be, I think 1 is forward, 2 is backward, and the third one is random, which is the one that we want. Yeah, actually, if if you hover over this, there's a pop-up saying 0 is static, which is nothing. 1 cycles forward, 2 cycles backward, and 3 is random, which is what we want. So I want to variate throughout the entire set of meshes. So I'm gonna go variations. I want, let's say, I'm gonna set it to 6, right? And make it random. And you'll have to do that for each one of these ones. So I'm gonna click on that, variation 6, set to random, variation 6, set to random, 6, set to random, 6, and set to random, 6, random, 6, and random. Cool. So hopefully that's going to work. But basically, when I draw a curve now, ZBrush is going to randomize the placement of these things along the curve. And because each one of these meshes has the settings that we set up, like stretch, well point, and curve resolution, it's going to look neat, hopefully. Hopefully. So this is our mesh. Didn't work. All right, let me just think why it didn't work. Now it worked. So I selected the wrong one. So the first one, right? So that's pretty cool. Let me undo that. Click and drag. So I have a bunch of different meshes. And I think I left in the stroke palette, I also left liquid enable. So I'm going to turn liquid off so that I can manipulate this a little bit better. Oops. So you'll see it's just randomly placing these items that we created along the curve, which is pretty cool. Another thing you can do to manipulate the curve a little bit more is you can click the curve, and after you click, you can hold Shift, and ZBrush is going to smooth that curve to the point that, it almost kills it. I'm going to enable liquid. I'm going to put this point here, and then I can just drag this out. And as I drag these points, ZBrush is creating more of the different meshes randomly that we wanted to create in the first place, which is pretty cool. All right, so that is the whole point of what we did. Now, as I mentioned, the gap, right, the gap between the gemstones is going to be pretty standard. Also, it's going to be very consistent depending on the size. So this one is a little bit bigger, so the size between this one and this one is going to be a little bit less than these two because the gemstone is a little bit smaller. But if you want to make it even more random or create a more variation in this style, what you can do is go to the original one, to original tool. You can take, for example, let's say go into solo mode. This one, mask everything. Sorry, everything but the string, and I'm just gonna scale it down like so. All right. So the point at the start and at the end should be the same. I think it should be the same in theory. So if you reduce the size of this, it doesn't matter. It's still gonna merge them together. Clear the mask. I'm gonna do that with these ones just to produce a different mesh. So I'm just reducing randomly the size. Maybe this one needs to have more space, so I don't know, just to see if that works, just scaling that up. Actually haven't tested this, but like in theory it should work. and this one we can just scale it down a bit. All right, so let's just go through the, let's go to the, I'm gonna save this one. I can share it with you guys if you wanted to. Let me just save it here. And what's today's date? 21st. Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and create a new one. Create insert multi-mesh. That's done. And I'm just gonna go through the process of doing what I did with the other one really quickly. So where is my curve, my stroke palette? Yeah, turn that into curve brush. And in the modifiers, I'm just gonna go for the first one, increase variations, increase curve to 20, curve to 20, increase variations to randomize it. So I'm just gonna a little bit faster here, just repeating what we did with the previous one. Cool. All right, so hopefully that's gonna work in the same way. Let's go back to our testing plane. And if I click on this one, I should be able to update this with the new brush. Whoops. Yeah, there you go. Forgot to select the first one. Right, so that one looks a little bit better, although the thickness of the string changed. That's something that I forgot to do. So if you want to maintain a thickness that is consistent, it's going to probably have to be done within the brush itself. I actually don't mind this effect, to be honest, and we can just mix them up. So if I just, oops, I just go ahead and select the other one. I can just do two of those, select the other brush, and do a couple of things like that. You know, it just very quickly creates something very complex, like this type of thing. And then I can just, because all of these ones will have different polyframes, right? I can just individually select those and just go through the process of manually placing them and tweaking things. So that's not too bad. I actually don't mind the mismatch, the mistake that we made with the thickness. That looks pretty cool. So now that you have that, you can just go to the character or whatever your character and apply these things all across. Now another thing that I should mention, which is pretty cool if you want to try it, is I'm going to show you with this one. And this is just to wrap up, guys. I have to go today, do some errands. Cool. So if you have like this is let's say the wrist of the character or the arm, you can actually wrap your multi-mesh insert around it into a perfect loop. So you can do a couple of things. You can start drawing. Maybe I'm going to reduce the size of my brush and just increase the size. All right, so you can click and drag, right? And then you can just go all around. Oops. Right, and drag that along. This curve doesn't have snap. I think it doesn't have snap. It does have snap. So maybe it's in the picker. Constant Z. It's because there we go. We have the lock start and the lock end. Yeah, so you can just go all around manually, and that's a little bit tedious. It gives you control to do it, but you know, it might be a little bit tedious to do that. So one thing you can do is, let me undo all that. You can just click and drag the curve around, And if you go outside of the mesh, so into the canvas, if there's no any other surface behind this cylinder or the arm or whatever it is, you can hold shift and ZBrush is going to create this loop, this perfect loop. So you can just, another thing is I can increase my brush size after it's placed and then just play around with the shape of this. I did something wrong there. I moved it too much. All right. So that's one way to go about it, and this is really cool because then you can, you know, it doesn't have to be straight either. So you can just drag something like that, hold shift, and then you'll see as I rotate, I'm holding shift, it just wraps it around the cylinder. We'll probably need to create a bit of a increase the resolution of the curve. Alright, so all I did was decrease the curve step a little bit. It's not making much of a change, but it's just squishing everything a little bit. It's actually too much, 0.5. Right, so this is what I would do for the wrist, you know, that type of stuff. And generate that stuff. I mean, once you do this, then you can go ahead and fine tune it even more, maybe inflate it, you know, change the size a bit, just to generate a bit of a difference between the assets that you're creating for the character. But this is a really cool, easy way to do it. You can create multiple as well, multiple of these, you know, not the gemstones, but multiple brushes, and then you can have fun just placing these assets into the character. So I just wanted to show you the process of how I would build something like that, and we don't have time to add those details today into the actual character, where I lost him. Here is my character. Just one more thing that I want to show you before we wrap up. I'm going to set this to 1. Is when you're going to draw a curve like this, or an insert curve brush like this, you need to have some original mesh where you're drawing it that doesn't have subdivision. So if everything has subdivision, what I like to do is just append, where are we? Append a cube, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Select that cube. I just click on cube to simplify it even more, but it's somewhere there, right in the middle. Yeah, so that's basically what I do. I just create a cube and make it very tiny and make sure that it's embedded somewhere that I cannot see it. I'm going to delete it at the end, but I just set it up so that I don't see it. So I can draw all of these lines in this cube, but ZBrush is going to take into account the surface that I have visible. So I'm just going to show you really quickly. So I'm going to start here, creating this. Alright, so that is my character's necklace. I can just increase the brush size a bit so that I increase the size of the necklace itself, a bit less than that. Oops, reduce the size a bit. So that's good. And then I can go to the stroke palette, make sure I lock the end and lock the start, and then use liquid to push things a little bit. Right, so then the next step will be just to, you know, have the patience to go over the whole thing and play around with it. You know, make sure that there's no intersections in the geometry and things like that, unless you're doing some 3D printing or something that might be useful for that. Another thing another tip I can give you with this type of stuff is if I go into solo, you'll see now I have my cube. I'm gonna clear the mask. So I'm basically drawing these curves in the cube, but the cube is not visible, and at the end I'm gonna delete it. So something you can do, I guess, would be, you know, because everything has different polygroups, I can select this one. Actually, I can go ahead and click auto groups, and I think I'm not welding this for some reason. I have to check that. In the example I gave you before, they're all welded. In this case, they're not. and I think it has to do with the liquefy, or the liquid. But anyway, not a big deal. I will just check that again because these ones are welding properly. I don't know. Cool. So now that I have a bunch of different polygroups, I can just select this one, hold Control, and invert that selection. So now I have this on its own. With the gizmo, I can center the gizmo, and I can hold Control, and rotate this around if I wanted to add more along the curve, right? So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and hold Control and Shift to select this. Before I let go, I'm going to hold the Alt key to invert that selection. So I hide that cube, and I can delete hidden. So now this is on its own thing, and that's it. That's pretty much it. All right. I'll have to do it properly because I also have the code and everything on top. Let me just turn everything that this guy has, so you can see it. See, even like the the beer is just covering it. So I have to do it properly, but just to make an example of this. Just with a big brush, using the move brush. This is gonna distort things a little bit, but it's just to give you an idea. Cool. So what else do we have? We decided to go for the FiberMesh, this one, right? This one is kind of cool, but yeah, I'm gonna go for the FiberMesh one. What else do we need to enable? So we have this, that one, and then we have a bunch of other stuff that I made afterwards. All right, there we go. Cool. So we did much today, but it was just mainly that necklace thing and the effect that you can have control over the fibers with Nanomesh, which is this one that we did here. I think this is the one. Yeah. So this is Nanomesh. This is not FiberMesh. It is Nanomesh. Although you can control it as FiberMesh because the underlying geometry is actual FiberMesh. So that's a pretty cool. Like if you miss this one, it will be once it's up there you can revisit it. Cool. I'm gonna turn on perspective, do a quick render, and if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But we're gonna wrap it here for the most part. Game launcher, you could add random rotation to them too. To the actual meshes, you mean? Oh, I thought you were asking. Yeah, I think you can. And I think that's the problem with the welding. What I have right now, they're actually rotating, and that's why they're not welding together. But so I have to check that as well. My question is, if you have the multi-mesh insert brush, is there a way to edit a brush that has already been created? Example, changing out a gem shape. Yeah, totally. You will just need to kind of like extract whatever you want from that insert brush into a normal subtool or a different mesh. Do the edits and then just go into create insert mesh and then just add it to whatever you have selected as a brush. So I don't use that too much, but I know for a fact there is a way to do it either from the brush palette. No, I don't think it's in the brush palette. I think it's in the geometry. Well, it makes more sense to be in the geometry. So if you go to the geometry sub palette, I'm sure it's here. Give me 1 second. I don't very rarely I use it, but I know it's here. It should be here. Well, if someone knows, just put it in there. Modify geometry, modify topology. I'm sure it's somewhere here. So what I'm trying to look for is there's a button that once you have select, maybe it is because, yeah, what an idiot. Here it is. So I'm going to select the mesh. So this is just to answer your question of how to edit stuff. So if I want to just edit this piece on this mesh, what I would need to do is to extract it as a normal, mesh, or let's just go to this example or whatever. So when you have the IMM selected, then this button will be enabled, which I had the move brush before, that's why it was grayed out. It's called mesh from brush. So whatever you have selected, if you click mesh from brush, it's just gonna take whatever you had selected as a subtool, which was that mesh. That's why I moved to a different project, otherwise it would have replaced my character, and it would just create this single mesh out of the brush. So you can extract whichever you want. You can take that one, and that's again under the geometry subpalette, modify topology, click mesh from brush, and now we have the mesh again. Just be careful that whatever you choose, it's just going to replace your current subtool. So you take that one and you can edit it. So let's say you take the move brush and do this type of thing. So once you finish editing, if you want to put this back into the brush that you're using and it has all the settings, you select that one and click on the brush thumbnail, go into create insert mesh, just one mesh, because that's the one that you're editing. You're not editing multiple. Click on that, and instead of creating a new one, you just go append, right, and just click OK. And now ZBrush is going to take that new mesh and append it to the, so now it's going to be part of this thing, right? If you don't want to have, like, let's say that you change this and you want to keep this one, but this one is not doing anything and you don't like it, which in this case would be this one, what I want to do is just delete it. So you can go to the brush palette, and the first subtab is the create subtab. So you can just select the mesh that you want to get rid of and click delete mesh, and that's it. It's gone. That's it. Hopefully that answers your question, comics legend. Cool. Awesome. So I think that's it. That's it for today, guys. Hopefully you can take something away from these little techniques that I'm showing you. I do have a little bit. I do have a lot of fun actually, just doing these different things and testing things. Like half of the things that I showed you today, like I know like the principle, but I don't use them often, or some of them I don't use them often. So it's always good to refresh and try different things. I'm gonna enable my filters just to see if it makes any difference. There we go. I'm just gonna make it a quick comic just to finish up with that. I'm just gonna turn off the filters. I'm just gonna use the comic. Oops. Turn on the floor. The comic material that I have is just a black and white material that I did to create kind of like the outline. That's horrible. Never mind. Let's just keep it simple. Cool. What's the software are you using to mark the screen? That is Epic Pen, right? This thing, it's called Epic Pen. It's a free software. I mean, they have a paid version which I have, and that gives me access to these, to other things like, I can do this, it's like a whiteboard thing. But it's a free software if you just want to mark out the screen like I've been doing. Anyway, so I'm gonna leave it here, guys. I gotta run today, but it's been fantastic. So I think I'm gonna, call this guy finished. I don't know if I'm gonna take it any further than this. Maybe add some polypaint or something if I have the time. But I think we cover a lot of the techniques. So let me just show you the original little thumbnail sketch that we did very early on, and the final result. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. This is gonna be the end of this character, as in I'm not gonna work on this anymore, in at least during the streams, and in the next week we'll probably start something new. So if you have any questions or any suggestions or whatever you wanna see, make sure that when you come back next week you have them ready, and we can do kind of like a Q&A type of thing next week, and see what questions you have and what you want to see. And depending on what your interests are, I can show you. If I know the process, I'll show you the steps. So again, thank you so much for joining in. Really cool. Next week we're gonna work on something else, whatever you guys want. Yeah, other than that, I think that's it. No other questions. All good. Thanks so much for tuning in. I have something pretty cool, like I mentioned last week, something pretty cool coming up. It's a massive project that I've been working on. Cannot say too much right now, but as soon as it's ready, you guys are gonna be the first to know in the stream. But if you're also part of the ZBrush Guides newsletter, I'll send you an email when I finish that. It's gonna be pretty cool, and hopefully it's something that's gonna help you guys quite a bit. All right, so I'm gonna leave it here, and I'll see you guys next week. So have a good one, and happy ZBrushing. Cheers.